Hello and welcome to the Lukacs podcast. I'm your host, Dan Maurice, and with me in the studio today are my good friends Emma and Chris Simmons.
Hello. Dan.
In this episode, we get closer to home, for I have literally lived with Emma and Chris for the last 8 years, right here in the inner city. Inspired by projects from Germany to Philadelphia, we started a community house right here in the heart of Bristol. We've seen highs and lows, made plenty of mistakes, and built some beautiful friendships along the way. For the next half an hour, I pepper Em and Chris with questions about how on earth we managed to do this, where we got our inspiration, and how we can pass on the vision. What is that vision? Where do we get it from? And what does it look like for this generation in this moment? Let's find out. So, Em and Chris, we've been on this journey for a while. In fact, Emma particularly, you were with me from the beginning. I mean, literally day one of my life.
I think I met you on day 2 of your life, actually, and I was convinced you were called Julian.
Okay.
Which
Julian?
I know.
I'm going to call him Julian
could
from now
not
on.
keep Dan in my head.
You've
I think everyone
literally
thought I was being
never told me that.
difficult. Everyone thought I was being difficult because
Oh,
I didn't
Julian.
want a little brother. I was genuinely just couldn't remember Dan.
Well, you've managed it now.
Yeah, I've got that.
Yeah, cheers, mate. So that's right. Emma is my big sister. And Chris, you married into this crazy family. Maybe talk us through how that happened?
Yeah, so where to start? Yeah, well, I met your sister in London when she ambushed me at a barbecue that I was doing for some friends.
Oh my life,
basi-
that is so not how it
That's
happened.
literally what happened. So Emma rocked up half an hour before the barbecue to give me 20 minutes of her precious time while I was trying to, obviously, you know, I'm an Englishman trying to light a barbecue. So there's lots of wafting and puffing and not much heat happening, lots of smoke. And then Emma sort of peering through the smoke, trying to gauge if I'm going to be her future husband or not. And yeah, it started strong and went on from there, really.
That is one version.
What's the other version?
I think we just had a mutual friend who'd gone on and on about this guy for about 6 months.
What a
and just
guy.
Was not interested. So to kind of stop all of this going on, I agreed to meet you for 20 minutes. So I did, and then I left. Yeah.
The rest is history.
You
But
were
yeah.
quite persistent from that point onwards.
So we met in London, how many years ago? Let's say 12 years ago or so. And then, you know, the courtship from heaven ensued. And a year and a half we were married later. And then baby Jamie came along a couple of years after that. And then we moved to Bristol about 8 years ago.
Nice. So you say you moved to Bristol. That's a bit of a brief summary. You didn't make the normal move to Bristol. What happened? I mean, we started something a little bit unconventional.
It was kind of, I think, probably Chris's idea to start with.
As a combined idea. So obviously we were living in London. Emma's a country girl, born and bred. I'm a city boy, born and bred, but I was happy to go to, you know, a smaller city.
The village of Bristol.
Yeah, with easier access to the country. I was quite happy to do that. And Bristol was just a happy kind of, Dan, you were living here and your mum was living down the road in Taunton. So Bristol felt like a good shout. And Dan, you were very respectful actually of our decision making and were very quiet and not trying to harangue us to move to Bristol, even though you really liked the idea for some reason.
I knew it would happen.
And so Dan was being quietly confident. But as soon as we said, yeah, we're moving to Bristol, you were like, oh, great, we could live in the same street or something. And I was like, oh, let's go one up on that. Let's live in the same house. I can live with anyone. And Emma, well, spent 18 years living with you. So she can definitely live with you. So, and vice versa.
Yeah, and we had Anna, also in Bristol.
Emma's bestie.
So she joined in as well.
Yeah. And yeah, for us, we didn't have any money and you guys are both single. So we're like, well, if we team up, we can buy a house together. And we're also quite taken with the community house idea. I'd come across it through Shane Claiborne, who spoke at a church in South London years and years previously. And he just was like, look, when you get a bunch of people living together with the heart of the community, you can do so much more because you can just egg each other on, iron sharpens iron, and it just stops you becoming a kind of introverted little nuclear bubble. And you can become something that just wants to engage in their community and stuff. And that's how it's worked out.
Yeah. So actually, I had been reading the same book. I read The Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne. I mean, you heard him speak. I read his book. And yeah, similarly inspired, he started projects in Philadelphia, he went to Calcutta, he went to Iraq, and just saw different communities around the world where people are really just loving their neighbours, doing the simple stuff, but doing it well and doing it in a way which, yeah, I guess they're happy to sacrifice a little bit of their own comforts, but also just to really enjoy meeting new people and being open and, don't know, just caught the vision and thought, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And Bristol's got a history of it as well. Of course, George Muller was here in Bristol. He rescued thousands of orphans from the streets of Bristol in the Victorian era, and some of his houses have still been used by people for community houses now. We've got friends who are running those. So it just felt like a vision that people had already started, and you'd seen a bit of that in South Africa. So we just thought, let's give it a go.
Yeah. I don't even see it particularly as being this kind of noble altruistic thing. It's just a great way of living. Like when we lived as that kind of more classic nuclear family, just Emma and I and baby Jamie in South London, it was really hard to get our neighbours to come out and have a barbecue once a year. We'd have to kind of cajole them into it. And when they came out finally, and everyone was like, oh, this is great, we should do this more. And then you kind of wait another year for another little barbecue. But then when we moved to Bristol, to this inner city neighbourhood, we just found people were just like hanging out on their front stoops, as it were, and out in the streets. It was a completely different environment. We were welcomed with open arms. And it was not a struggle at all to get to know our community. So I think living in a bigger house, but also living in a community that is kind of all about kind of getting to actually know your neighbours has been just an absolute joy. And it's just way more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we did this, though, one of the main things, I remember praying in a park in Bristol, like the four of us, when we were sort of looking at houses to buy. And actually what we really wanted was also not to be... When you have those kind of thoughts of, every new year you make a New Year's resolution, I'm going to get to know the people around me, or I'm going to join this, or I'm going to do that. And life just gets in the way of that. You get busy, you're distracted, you go out with your friends, work's going on, all that sort of thing. And the idea of the four of us being together, like one of the big things about that was that we would just kind of, you'd have a wingman or a wingwoman with you, just to encourage each other on and sort of be a bit accountable.
Yeah. Not
in a weird way, but actually the four of us know each other really well. And it's okay, like we trust each other to hold each other to account, but also just to be encouraging and to kind of do it with you. And that sort of thing. And I think that was one of the really big things that we wanted to do when we started, and actually that's continued.
Yeah.
And it's really good to not lose sight of that. And that's what's enabled us to just do more and more. And actually, as more and more people have sort of joined the snowball, like that kind of that wingman or that wingwoman, there's just more of them. But there's also more people with visions, more people with dreams. And it doesn't matter if some people are just really busy and don't have time necessarily to dream big for their immediate community. They can just rock up.
Yeah.
And between us all, there's always someone having a go at something.
Yeah.
Very good.
It has been a bit like a relay race at times where you've got the energy for your stretch, you do it, you pass the baton on, someone else often sort of takes over. It's been quite organic. But when you've got a lot of people in there all helping out, it's a good team effort.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess we didn't know it was going to be like that when we started.
It wasn't like that initially, yeah.
We all said we'd do this for 2 years, and here we all are.
8 years later.
Yeah. Having a great time.
Maybe we should just explain how this adventure started, because we didn't just move into a house. We actually spent quite a long time looking and didn't really get anywhere.
No. We kept thinking that we'd found the right house, and then it'd fall through, and we'd be like, oh, we're not very good at this.
There'd be Japanese knotweed or subsidence.
So we're starting to get a little bit despondent, gave up all parameters that previously set and just looked at anything, anywhere. And then we found this place in the inner city on an auction. So we basically decided this place is definitely left field. It didn't really have electricity, plumbing, doors, windows, anything really. It had a bit of a notorious history. It wasn't really stable.
It was boarded up, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So we decided, look, if this is meant to be, I'll go along to the auction. We'll bid a ridiculously low offer. And if we get it, we know there's some kind of favour in this. So that's what we did. I went to an auction in Bristol Zoo. It was me and a bunch of guys in pinstripe suits. I was there in jeans and T-shirt pretending I knew what I was doing. I put in a bid looking slightly suspicious and no one really bid and we got it. So I think I left and phoned you and said, we've accidentally bought this house And I don't think you believed me.
No, I thought you were joking. In fact, I'd completely forgotten the auction was happening.
Strong.
It's been a while. This had all been going along for a long time.
So I panicked really, and I'm like, we've bought a house.
No, you'd bought a house.
With our money, with our collective savings from 4 people, we'd bought a house. And so you came down to look at it for the first time. Yeah, you weren't massively impressed by it to begin with.
No,
I mean, say we went to have a look at it. We had a feel around in pitch blackness with torches because all the windows were boarded up.
Yeah.
There were literal holes in the floor and roof with water pouring in.
It's a bit like the Crystal Maze. Just getting through the house was kind of like a physical and a mental.
And it smelled so bad. Oh.
And it literally wasn't a house, which was one of the reasons it turns out, couldn't actually get a domestic mortgage. Because when a bank lender valuer guy came around and was like, there's 2 reasons why you can't get a house mortgage on this. One of them, it's not a house. And the second one, it's not livable, as in there's no kitchen, there's no bathroom, and it's a death trap.
I got a gas stove.
And there was a toilet upstairs. It wasn't plumbed in, it was in the middle of the room, but it had been used.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I think the first couple of years we lived there was just sort of scrimping and saving, digging up holes, replacing bits. We had, as a builder in our church, came to help us.
He was great.
He was brilliant. Thanks, Jason. And yeah, we were just repairing bits, filling skips.
Joking about the fact that we'd all said unanimously, we don't want to buy a project.
Did we say that?
Yeah, 100. Well, I did. I thought we were all agreed on the fact we were not buying a project.
We definitely didn't stick to that.
No, I know.
Yeah, so I think we basically went into this with absolutely no idea what we were doing. We didn't know the community, didn't know how to do up houses, didn't really know what we were doing. We'd basically just caught this vision from people like Shane Claiborne and thought, well, let's have a go. We had spoken to some other community houses in the neighbourhood. So I remember Dave Mitchell, who was in last week's episode, said that if you want to start a project like this, it's worth just having some kind of values that you agree at the beginning. So you've got a bit of this is what we're up for. And I think we didn't really want to make it too official. I always say we're more about a culture than a contract. We didn't want to sign up to something. We just wanted to do it a bit more organically. But the danger of that is you end up just sort of slipping into doing nothing. So we sort of agreed, well, let's have a few things that we commit to.
So I think in terms of, it was a rhythm rather than a rule. And I guess our rhythm was, we started praying on Friday mornings quite early on. And as I think Em mentioned earlier, soon after we moved to the area, just other people started moving in. So we'd meet with them on a Friday morning. And that was, for me, that was the real engine room of this. So many ideas, so many initiatives kind of came out of that time together, just as we were praying for each other and for the community. So that was a real sort of powerhouse that sort of undergirded what we did. But then, for us as a house, we've just always taken it turns to cook and just committed to eating with each other when possible. And obviously, if you're out, that's totally fine. But it's just an important kind of part of the day, just to sort of share our lives and what's been going on that day, and to kind of laugh and cry with each other and that sort of thing. It's sort of all just sort of worked out from there. But yeah, really the only kind of fixed rhythms was sort of praying and eating together, I guess.
So we kind of, you're right, the first thing we agreed on was just praying, partly because we felt a bit out of our depth, but also a lot of the communities we'd sort of studied. I'd read Red Moon Rising by Pete Greig and learned a bit about the Moravian community, and kind of just got the idea that everyone who tries this needs to pray. And then we can kind of be directed as we pray. So we're doing that. But also we felt like we wanted to really engage in the community. We didn't want to be those guys that are coming in with some new ideas. We thought there's loads of good stuff happening in our neighbourhood. Why don't we just serve some of the great projects that are already there? So, a good example is 125. So Val Gill, Dave Gill's mum, who was in the last episode, she started this amazing project rescuing. Why didn't you explain?
So 125 is a charity that works with street sex workers. So just absolutely loves really vulnerable women in Bristol, and kind of helps them exit street sex work when they're ready. And I think the benefit for the way that they can work which is different to sort of a councillor's. It's quite holistic. They've got a van going out, a drop-in, and working for them was just an absolute privilege. I learned a lot. And it was a great team. It was brilliant. It was such a lovely job to have when I first moved to Bristol, and they were so welcoming.
Yeah. And then one of our housemates, Kirsten, also volunteered for them in the van. The lads couldn't really get involved in that, honestly. So we did other stuff. I think a lot of the things that happened were just organic. I got chatting to a neighbour once. In fact, you took Hannah when she was born to meet her, because people like meeting your new baby.
Yeah, they do.
And
she wasn't so keen. She didn't, she didn't really like people.
She does now.
She does now.
Just a baby, wanted a mum. But we got chatting to our neighbours, I think, when that happened. And then I ended up helping one kid with his maths homework. Realised, don't really get GCSE maths. So I only got Louise, who had moved into the neighbourhood. She, who was in the Chile episode, she came and helped him with his maths homework. And then I just chatted to the family in the kitchen. And so we just things like that, we naturally, and then they would cook us, like during Eid, they'd often cook us food and bring it round. And then, our neighbour would often get chatting to just outside. He'd be cooking some curry goat and we'd get chatting, and then the evening's gone. So a lot of those things, just really nice friendships, would just grown organically.
Yeah.
I think there was moments where we realised that people were really there for us. And I think for me, one of the things I noticed is some of my friends from outside of Bristol had heard about our neighbourhood and thought it was, it's got a reputation for being dangerous, the inner city. But actually we saw a real beauty. There was one particular incident, I remember, with a chimney. I think you were the first to the door. What was going on there?
These guys were knocking down the door because they thought I was going to get burnt alive in my house because it was on fire. And I explained I just lit the chimney in the back garden. And they were, a chimney what?
Yeah, I didn't know either.
Bonfire. Okay, it's fine. But just the fact that they were pounding on the door, which, stood up. It's all good. Yeah. Pounding on the door to get us out. Exactly. Was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes need just presents itself and just falls on your lap. And like there was a nearby family who needed a bit of help with painting, so we went round there. I think you mentioned that in your book, and Swedan came and helped out as well. And then he ended up doing this sort of spontaneous little musical thing in the evening in our garden. And then that family came around as well as half of the local neighbourhood. And it's just one of those spontaneous, came out of nowhere, amazing evenings, and it just brought everything together in a really beautiful way. And then their kids have since helped us paint the girls' house over the road, and it's just such it's a great picture of community, give and take. So sometimes doors just open to you, and when you walk through them, you'll be surprised what you find.
I guess we just weren't very prescriptive. We just thought we'd sort of go with the flow a bit, and actually that worked out quite well. Yeah. And the times when we were maybe a bit more prescriptive weren't the ones that necessarily, were great.
I guess, you're right, we made ourselves available.
Availability is a key, that's the word that comes to me,
I heard someone say, it's not about your ability, it's about your availability.
Yeah.
Which is good, because we didn't have many abilities that were really relevant.
Speak for yourself.
So, I'd also say it's important to say we had some things that worked really well. We also made some mistakes. What would you say were the things we learnt the hard way?
We were really bad with food.
Do you think?
Yes. I think we thought this would be like an absolute key. Everyone eats, everyone loves food. And I remember we'd met so many different people and had kind of friendships with different people, but felt that those different groups weren't they didn't necessarily know each other. So do you remember this? We tried to kind of bring different people over that we were friends with for food.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it really...
It didn't work at all, did it?
It really didn't.
No one ate?
Well, A, no one really ate. B, when you say, right, we're going to, have lunch at 12, no one turned up at 12. So they'd turn up whenever. They'd bring random things, but also no one really wanted to see anyone else. So it was always this slightly odd... Yeah, we stopped doing that.
It's actually easier just to meet people on the street and in the park. People quite like hanging out on the pavement. So we'd often spend hours just sitting on the pavement.
Yeah, and it was weird to go round to someone's house.
Yeah. And there were some moments, I guess, just took us by surprise. So I'd gone to Toronto for a few weeks. This was a few years ago now. and heard a guy called Barry Adams share an amazing message about the Father's love. He called it the love of God, and he wrote this thing called the Father's Love Letter. And while I was there, unbeknown to me or you, what was happening in Bristol?
I think I was at church. It was January, so I was having that sort of new year, new thought, what's my new dream, and kind of talking to God about that. And I felt that God was saying to send a Father's Love Letter to our neighbourhood. Chris and I had seen this work in London. We'd seen this happen in our neighbourhood. So it wasn't a kind of a completely fresh idea, but I'd forgotten about it. So yes, I sort of came home, and I think you'd landed. It was the day you were coming home. So I came back from church and you were there. I'm like, hi, it's great to have you back. I've just had this like really cool moment with God, and I, think we should do a Father's Love Letter. And you were like,
I think I was like holding it.
You were like, you'll never guess what.
Yeah.
I just gave one to the air hostess on the plane. Like, what?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
So we just made one on Word.
Yeah.
Because you can take everything off Google now. So
We did credit. Did we credit Barry?
oh, we did it all completely correctly.
It's good. And then we basically printed it off and just dropped it around all our
We got
neighbourhood.
like 40,000 printed or something.
We had, so all our you'd got to know a few of the families in the neighbourhood, and all the kids thought it would be great fun. So we delivered that out to loads of people. I think for some bizarre reason, we gave them a mobile number and said, look, if you want us to pray for you as a group of people. And by this point, there were people from the neighbourhood gathering to pray on a Friday morning thing. And yeah, people were texting. We had one particular lady who texted and said, oh my goodness, it's been a terrible year. This thing has totally changed me. I put it on my mantelpiece. I look at it every day. I'm so grateful. And I think we kind of thought, you know what, if all of this was just for that one person,
Just for her, yeah.
it's worth it.
It's definitely worth it. So sometimes it's kind of those sort of initiative, project-y type things. But I think what we really love is just the doing life together, just sort of finding out who isolated people are, and some of the kind of community WhatsApp groups that have come up through COVID have been amazing because they've just joined up the community. And again, it's just something we could join in with, which is just fantastic. There's a community garden around the corner, which has been amazing at just drawing people together. And again, like that's got nothing to do with us, but we've just joined in. So yeah, we just love living here, and it really does feel like it's actual community, not just a word.
Yeah. I guess we also started to see that other houses in the neighbourhood would often take people in. So a lot of the families that we knew, our neighbours and stuff, would often just have someone else living with them. Could be a relative, could be a friend. And we started to think, well, we were really inspired by that and thought, well, we could do the same. Why not use our spare room if need be? And I think that's been I've really enjoyed that, having people come to live with us from completely different cultures, or often different languages, bring different things to a dinner table.
Yeah, true.
And so, for example, at the moment, we've got a young lad from Afghanistan, and he's been such a delight. We've loved having him in our home.
Yeah, he's lush.
Played a lot of cricket.
He's really good at cricket.
Well, I think the bar's quite low in our house. So he is really good at cricket.
And cub. Played a lot of cub.
Yeah, you learn good sort of garden games when you don't have much language. Mm-hmm. But all that has just been good fun.
Yeah, and it's been great actually having a spare room to kind of bless people with. I think when Chris and I got married, I had sort of 2 months of being sort of slightly homeless, having handed back a flat with my friends because that was coming to an end. But the place we were moving into actually ended up getting delayed by about 2 months. So you were at your parents because we weren't married. And I ended up living with a friend called Vanessa who just said, I've got a spare room. Why don't you just move in here? It was just such a blessing. I remember being so stressed thinking, why on earth do I find somewhere to live for 2 months? And then she just, as if this was completely normal, which obviously it is. Actually just feeling so blessed. And at the time thinking, when I've got a spare room, I'm totally going to play this blessing forward. Yeah. So having like friends come and stay, and friends of friends, and sometimes that's people who just need a bit of a break for whatever reason, or they're just kind of moving to an area and haven't found somewhere yet, or it's just been a complete spectrum of different people and different cultures for different reasons passing through, and it's just been really strong.
Yeah. And just as you say, I think I've also been on the receiving end of that, particularly in the process of writing this book. I found myself in remote communities, completely out of my depth, and been rescued. And so I kind of feel like we've slightly entered into a sort of hospitality culture where if you're willing to give up your space to help someone, and you're also willing to say to someone, help, it's give and take. And some days you have a guy that's got the spare room, and other days you have a guy that needs it. And kind of there's an openness at both ends. Then you start to rely on one another, and like at the stages in life we all need that.
Totally. Yeah. And I think also it just like I'm a completely different person. Like it changes you every time you live with someone. You learn a little bit more about yourself. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. But both of those are really positive things in terms of shaping us going forwards.
Oh, definitely. And I think one of the things that we've started to think more recently is we want other people to sort of catch this vision. So I work for a charity in Bristol, and we work with a lot of refugees, and there's always a sort of scrabble to try and find housing. And I don't know, I just feel like we learnt this vision from other people. It's not like we came up with ourselves. We saw loads of other people just doing this. And so we'd love it if we could pay that forward. Other people could catch the vision as well. We had one particular moment where someone came to stay with us and he went home and did exactly the same.
Sweden.
Exactly. So, do
you want to explain Sweden? Because it probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, he's called Daniel Abrahamsson. He's a Swedish musician. And one of our neighbours, because I'm also called Dan, to differentiate between the two of us, just called him Swedan, which we all thought was hilarious. And it stuck.
Yeah.
Whether he likes it or not. It'd probably be better if he told the story.
Are you going to call him?
I could just call him.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Sweden.
Hi, guys. How are you?
We're great. We're all good.
Yeah.
You sound exactly the same.
Nice.
Yeah. Where did a few years go?
I know COVID got in the way of us seeing you.
Yeah, I know.
You're very welcome to come.
Yeah. We made a bed up for you 2 years ago, and it's still waiting. It's
The
kind of
cat's
awkward.
asleep.
Yeah.
The cat's asleep on your bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we thought we should probably explain to our beloved audience how we first met.
Yeah.
So we were just chatting about living in community. We talked about the time this Swedish musician turned up at our house called Daniel Abrahamsson, and who was promptly named Swedan by our neighbour. And we thought, well, why not phone you up and you can tell the story?
Yeah. So the short version is that I lived in London, studied music, played music, and I ran out of money halfway, so I started busking. I lived with a couple of guys, and one of them, he was busking. So I started playing on the street. And then my last summer that I was going to stay in England, I decided to do a busking tour to travel around across the UK and also try and raise awareness about human trafficking. So I just looked at the map basically and decided for I think 7 cities, and Bristol was the first city.
Good choice.
So I packed my bags. It turned out to be a good choice. It was quite close that I wasn't gonna choose Bristol, but I ended up choosing. Yeah, so it was not my first choice, but I don't think I've ever told you this.
Didn't
but
tell us
anyway.
That when you
But I was very glad I did choose Bristol. So I packed my bags and I went there, and I didn't have any accommodation plans for any of the places, and I was going to travel alone for 2 months. So I thought it was good to try and connect with some people on the way. So I started calling around churches, and was it your church, Daniel?
It was my church, yeah.
Yeah, it was your church that answered.
Well, I don't own the church, but it's the church I go to.
It was someone working in the church. All of the church answered. No, someone working in the church. They answered. They said, "I think I might have a guy." I said, "Okay," and I sat on a bench in the middle of Bristol waiting, and then you called me back, and
I did.
Yeah, then rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. So Olivia called me and said, we have a traveling Swedish musician. He seems nice. Can you take him in? So I ran it past these guys. And you
we
all
said no.
Yeah. No, he said, yeah, let's try him out. And I think it wasn't that far from my house. So there was a knock at the door and you were there on the pavement grinning and I invited you in. And it was a bit chaotic that weekend because Emma and Chris, their church was running an event. Do you want to explain them what you were doing?
We're doing sort of a DIY SOS, which is teams of people go in and help sort of families or households with DIY, I guess.
Yeah.
And so we were doing an event that weekend, but it was kind of running from our house.
Yeah, there's lots of teams going out.
And so I think I remember apologising to you, Swedan, and saying, sorry, it's a bit chaotic. We would normally be able to hang out a bit more. And then you were like, well, I'll just join in. So you did. So I think you helped us do some work with one of our neighbours, and that was the weekend we actually all became friends, you and me and the family.
And I think they like Swedan more than you.
They did.
It's a bit awkward. They still talk about you, Swedan, before they talk about this Dan.
Yeah, for a while I was called Other Dan. Tried to explain, I've lived here for quite a while. How am I Other Dan? This guy's just rocked up. But you could sing, which improved things for you. In fact, when we finished all our work, you did a gig in our back garden and everyone came to see you, which was, I don't know if you'd planned on doing that.
Yeah, so I think I can't remember whose idea it was, but I was definitely up for it, and it turned out really, really well.
You remind me of love. You remind me of hope. You remind me of all the things I want to be reminded of. Thanks so much.
I think I've said this to you before, Dan, but Bristol was the first stop on the trip, but it was also the best part of the trip, which was kind of funny. But so many things on these couple of days that I still bring with me from the project and from the people and from your community house and your way of living and being an open house and open family. And a couple of months after I'd been in Bristol and visited you guys, I moved back to Sweden, and I felt this kind of urge to buy a house, and it didn't really make much sense because I didn't have much money. I've been living as a busker for the last 2 years in London, but I managed to sell my apartment and find a house that was just in my price range, and I bought it, and I asked a couple of friends and a couple of people that I didn't know before if they wanted to move in, and they did. So
amazing. And you've had people from all over the world living with you now.
Yeah, so I've had 2 people from Iran, refugees, and they actually started coming over to my house when I was renovating it because there was so much to do. Before I even knew them, they were kind of friends to friends. So and they weren't allowed to work, so they had a lot of free time and just came and helped me with the house. So 6 months later, when the place that the government had for them to stay in my city, it was closing down, so they had to move 5, 6, 7 hours up north. So all the connections they've done with the church and the people would have been lost. So they moved into my house, and one of them is still living at the house. Both.
Yeah, I met him. I came to visit you. It was a wonderful trip.
Yeah, that's right. And it's been many different people. We had a guy from Lebanon. He stayed for 3 months, I think. So right now we're only guys, but we've been a mixture of both guys and girls in different times.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So it's basically a huge bachelor pad at the moment, hence 2 hours of washing up.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's right. I have a bunch of dishes I need to do later this evening. So, but it's fine. I don't mind it. It's just it just takes a bit of time. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole vision of this community house movement for us is that we just wanted to sort of catch the vision and pay it forwards, really. So people have been doing way more amazing things than us for a long time before us. We just kind of had a go. And then, you know, for us, one of the real privileges has been you coming through our house and seeing you start something in Sweden and thinking, well, who else, you know, even someone listening to this podcast now might be thinking about how they might start their own community or their own expression of a community house where they are. So I don't know, any final thoughts, any tips, anything you'd say to someone who's thinking about doing this? Any of you, really?
Well, I suppose in answer to that question, I'll just take a very quick dive into, well, what's the point of community living? What's the point of living? And, you know, I often talk to the kids and I'm like, kids, what's the purpose of life? They're like, love. So I'm just trying to drill it into them that actually what gives life purpose and meaning is love. And I think whether you're in community living, as in a crazy big house with tons of people in it, and you're just learning about how to live, do life with people who are different to you, or whether you're in a regular house and you're learning about how to live in a kind of more open, extroverted way with the community beyond your front door, whatever that looks like. It's putting you in relationship with people who are different to you and learning how to love them, and that's the point.
Ah, that's so good. I would also say that it's, you know, when you start, especially if you're a couple of people that are starting it together at once, I would say it's always good to talk things through in the beginning, to just see so everyone is kind of on the same page, and then everything usually works itself out if everyone is just open to change and open to be kind and loving people, as Chris say. But it's definitely 100% worth it. It's so many good situations that I would never have experienced if it wouldn't be for this community house.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. I think what I love about the community living is it's kind of that complete opposite to sort of loneliness that you hear talked about so much, about how we are kind of losing connection with people, and people are lonely at home, they're sad, they don't know how to interact necessarily, or don't know how to kind of get out there. And more and more is on social media, you're kind of watching things through your laptop, but missing out on kind of actual real kind of conversations. And there's a real richness of relationship when you live with someone, and it doesn't matter how sort of similar or completely polar opposite you are. There's just something really enriching. And I think we're built for relationships. So journeying with someone for sort of a period of time affects you both. So it's kind of doing life in a really real way. It's sort of messy, it's wonderful, but you do develop friendships for life, sometimes with people who are completely different to you. And also you only have to, we only cook once a week each. So it's great. I only have to eat my own cooking once. And I only have to eat Dan's cooking once, so it's all okay.
Just about survives. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'd agree with what you've all shared. There's a richness and a beauty to community, even when it's not easy or when we make mistakes. There's grace for all of that. I think for me, my final thought is that I don't think we're doing anything particularly radical. I've met people doing far more amazing things than us. In fact, Sweden, we were on the receiving end of some of those compassionate communities in the Middle East. We'll talk about that in a couple of episodes. But right now, what we're doing in Bristol is just having a go, trying to come in the opposite spirit to the sort of individualistic obsession of the world revolves around me. Actually, we're just trying to learn how to prioritize other people. Because one day you'll be the one helping out, and the next day you'll be the one in need. And that's just what it's like to be part of a hospitality culture. And I think the more people enter into that culture, the more beautiful this world will become. Thank you for listening to the Luke X podcast. If you want to dig deeper into these stories and others like them, you can find them in the book Finding the Peacemakers by me, Dan Maurice, published by Hodder and Stoughton, available from wherever you buy books. Thanks to Emma, Chris and Sweden for your words of wisdom, to all the other wonderful people who've lived with us over the years, and to our friends in the neighbourhood who've taught us so much about community. If you're enjoying the Luke X podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review and share it on your social media channels. We'd love to get these stories out there, and if you can help spread the word, we'd be eternally grateful. In the next episode,
I'll be joined by my good friend Pete Kessel as we journey into the heart of the Negev desert on a perilous expedition. Find out more in the next episode.